The morning of December 16th, 1944, arrived cold and gray in the forests near Krinkelt, Belgium. Frost covered the ground. Bare trees stood motionless in the winter air. The front had been quiet for weeks, and many American soldiers believed the worst fighting of the war was behind them. But deep inside the Ardennes, hidden among the forests and narrow roads, something dangerous was already moving. A Sherman tank named Cobra King rolled forward with the rest of its column. Its engine growled through the frozen morning.
If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.
Inside the steel hull, 5 American crewmen focused on the road ahead. They had done this countless times before. Advance, watch the flanks, follow orders, keep moving. The routine felt familiar. It felt manageable. But on that morning, a hidden enemy was already watching. Far beyond the next line of trees, German forces were launching one of the most ambitious offensives of the war. Thousands of soldiers were moving through the Ardennes forest. Tanks, artillery, and anti-tank guns were advancing through roads covered in snow and ice. Their goal was simple but bold. Break through Allied lines, create chaos, and push toward Antwerp. Most American soldiers had no idea what was coming. The Sherman crew certainly did not. The tank commander, a young sergeant with months of combat experience, scanned the landscape through his hatch. The gunner watched the terrain ahead. The driver carefully guided the 30-ton vehicle along the narrow road. Everyone had learned to trust each other. In combat, trust was everything. The steel armor around them felt reassuring. The powerful engine beneath them felt reliable. The Sherman was not perfect, but it had carried American crews across Europe. What they could not see was the German anti-tank position hidden several hundred yards away. The Germans had arrived during the night. Their camouflage blended perfectly with the winter landscape. Branches covered equipment. Gun crews remained motionless. Orders were simple. Wait, observe, let the Americans come closer. The waiting was often the hardest part. A German gun commander peered through binoculars. He saw movement on the distant road. First one, Sherman. Then another. Then several more. He lowered the binoculars. The Americans were coming. Inside the Sherman, nobody noticed anything unusual. The crew continued advancing. The road curved through a forest clearing. Snow crunched beneath the tank tracks. Nearby infantry moved carefully along the roadside. Everything appeared normal. That illusion would not last. One of the cruel realities of armored warfare was that the crew inside a tank rarely knew exactly where danger was hiding. Trees could hide anti-tank guns. Buildings could conceal enemy infantry. A hill could mask an enemy tank. Every advance carried uncertainty, yet experience often created confidence. The Sherman crews had survived artillery attacks, air raids, and enemy ambushes before. Each successful mission reinforced belief in their abilities. They knew the risks, but they also knew hesitation could be deadly. So they pushed forward. The German gun crew remained still. The range closed. 800 yards. 700. 600. The gun commander watched carefully. Not yet. The Americans continued approaching. 500 yards. The Sherman commander leaned out slightly from his hatch. The morning air bit at his face. Visibility seemed good. The road ahead looked clear. Then something caught his attention. A flash. It lasted less than a second. A bright burst deep among the trees. At first it barely registered. Then reality arrived. The German anti-tank gun fired. The shell crossed the distance in an instant. The impact slammed into the lead Sherman with terrifying force. Metal exploded outward. Flames erupted from the vehicle. For a brief moment, nobody understood what had happened. Then, chaos consumed the road. The American column stopped immediately. Crewmen searched desperately for the source of the attack. Infantry dove into ditches. Officers shouted orders. Another German gun fired. A second shell streaked across the clearing. Another Sherman shuddered violently. Smoke poured from the vehicle. The ambush had begun. The hidden hunters had revealed themselves. Inside Cobra King, training took over. The commander shouted target directions. The gunner searched for the enemy position. The loader worked furiously. The driver maneuvered for cover. Every second mattered. The problem was visibility. The German guns had been carefully positioned. Trees concealed their locations. Camouflage hid their outlines. Smoke from the burning tanks added confusion. The Americans knew they were under attack. They did not know exactly from where. And that made all the difference. Another shell screamed overhead. The sound alone was unforgettable. Veterans often described anti-tank rounds as something between a crack and a shriek. The noise arrived almost simultaneously with destruction. One moment, everything seemed normal. The next moment, steel armor was torn apart. The Sherman crew understood this reality better than most. Yet, understanding danger and surviving danger were two different things. The commander spotted movement near a tree line. He immediately directed the gunner. The Sherman's 75mm gun swung toward the suspected position. The gunner adjusted. Loaded, ready, fire. The tank shook as its main gun fired. The shell disappeared into the forest. A moment later, dirt and branches erupted near the target area. The Americans had finally fired back. But had they hit anything? Nobody knew. The German crews quickly repositioned. That was another advantage of defensive ambushes. A hidden gun could fire, relocate, and fire again before the enemy fully identified its position. The battlefield became a deadly game of observation. Whoever saw first often survived. Whoever hesitated often died. The Sherman column attempted to organize a response. Additional tanks moved into firing positions. Artillery support was requested. Infantry spread through the woods searching for enemy positions. Yet the Germans continued striking. A third Sherman was hit. This time the result was immediate. Flames burst from the turret. Black smoke climbed into the winter sky. Crew members scrambled from escape hatches. Some made it out. Others did not. The sight affected everyone nearby. Tank crews understood what happened when armor was penetrated. Fuel, ammunition, and confined spaces created horrific conditions. Survival often depended on pure luck. The men inside Cobra King knew this. They kept fighting anyway. Hours seemed to pass, though only minutes had actually elapsed. The battlefield transformed into confusion. Smoke drifted between trees. Engines roared. Machine guns rattled. Artillery thundered in the distance. And somewhere among the forest, invisible hunters continued searching for targets. The Sherman commander realized remaining stationary would only make them easier targets. He ordered movement. The tank surged forward. Tracks bit into frozen ground. The vehicle pushed off the road and entered rough terrain. Branches scraped against armor. Snow sprayed behind the tracks. The crew hoped movement would reduce the enemy's accuracy. For a moment, it seemed to work. No shells struck them. No impacts rocked the hull. Maybe they had escaped the worst of the ambush. Maybe the German guns were focused elsewhere. Maybe fortune had finally shifted. Then disaster struck. A powerful impact slammed into the front of the Sherman. The entire tank lurched violently. The crew was thrown against metal surfaces. Lights flickered. Dust filled the compartment. For one terrifying second, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The crew simply waited. Fire, that was the first fear. Every tank crew feared fire. The commander quickly checked his surroundings. No flames. Not yet. The driver shouted that he was alive. The gunner responded. The loader responded. Everyone appeared conscious. But the tank itself had suffered damage. The vehicle could no longer move properly. The impact had crippled part of the running gear. They were now trapped. And trapped tanks rarely survived long. Outside, the German gun crews recognized the opportunity immediately. A stationary target was far easier to destroy. The next shot could be fatal. Inside the Sherman, urgency replaced confidence. The commander faced an impossible decision: stay inside and continue fighting, or abandon the vehicle. Neither option guaranteed survival. The battlefield offered no safe choices. Another enemy shell struck nearby. Metal fragments hammered the armor. The tank rocked again. The Germans were closing in. The commander made his choice: prepare to evacuate. The order spread through the compartment. Each crewman understood exactly what it meant. Leaving a tank during combat was among the most dangerous actions imaginable. Outside waited bullets, artillery, and enemy observation. Inside waited possible destruction. Seconds ticked away. The hatches opened. Cold air rushed inside. Smoke drifted across the battlefield. The crew began climbing out, one by one, fast but careful. The commander emerged first. He immediately scanned the area. The scene around him looked like something from a nightmare. Burning vehicles lined portions of the road. Wounded soldiers sought cover. Medics moved between positions. Machine gun fire echoed through the trees. The battle had become far larger than a simple ambush. The German offensive was spreading across the Ardennes. This fight was only one piece of a much larger storm. The Sherman crew moved away from their damaged vehicle. Each man carried whatever equipment he could manage. The tank that had protected them moments earlier now stood vulnerable behind them. For many crewmen during the war, abandoning a tank felt strangely personal. Months of service created attachment. The vehicle became home, workplace, and lifeline. Leaving it behind often felt like leaving part of oneself. Yet survival came first. The crew joined nearby infantry positions. Rifles replaced tank controls. The battle continued. German pressure intensified throughout the day. Roads became crowded with retreating vehicles, reinforcements, and refugees. Commanders struggled to understand the scale of the attack. Reports arrived constantly. Enemy armor had broken through. New positions were threatened. Units were being redirected. Confusion spread almost as quickly as fear. Yet resistance also hardened. American soldiers across the Ardennes began establishing defensive positions. Engineers destroyed bridges. Artillery batteries opened fire. Tank crews fought delaying actions. Small groups held crossroads against overwhelming odds. The Sherman crew that morning became part of that larger effort. Their tank was gone. Their mission had changed. But the war continued. As darkness approached, temperatures dropped further. Snow began falling. The battlefield grew quieter. Not peaceful, just quieter. The sounds of combat never completely disappeared. Distant artillery continued firing. Occasional gunfire echoed through forests. Vehicles moved cautiously along icy roads. Everyone knew the fighting would resume. The German offensive had only begun. For the crew of the damaged Sherman, the events of that morning remained vivid. The sudden flash among the trees, the first tank destroyed, the invisible enemy, the violent impact that crippled their vehicle. Each memory became permanently fixed. Years later, veterans would still remember specific details: the smell of smoke, the sound of tracks on frozen roads, the sight of burning armor against white snow. War had a way of preserving certain moments forever. The Battle of the Bulge would continue for weeks. It would become the largest battle fought by American forces during World War II. More than 1 million men would eventually participate. Thousands of tanks, artillery pieces, and vehicles would be committed. Casualties would be enormous. Yet behind those massive numbers existed countless individual stories. Stories like the Sherman crew that charged forward without hesitation. Stories where courage met uncertainty. Stories where confidence collided with hidden danger. Stories where ordinary men found themselves facing extraordinary circumstances. The invisible hunters of the Ardennes achieved surprise that morning. They damaged vehicles. They created chaos. They slowed the American advance. But they did not achieve victory. The offensive ultimately failed. The forests, roads, and villages of the Ardennes became the scene of fierce resistance. American soldiers absorbed the initial shock, regrouped, and fought back. Reinforcements arrived. Air power returned when weather improved. German momentum gradually faded. History often remembers campaigns through maps and statistics. Veterans remember something different. They remember faces, voices, moments. For the Sherman crew, the war was not a colored line on a map. It was a freezing morning in Belgium. It was trust among 5 men inside a steel machine. It was the sudden realization that someone unseen was watching. It was the terrifying sound of incoming fire. It was the moment disaster struck. And it was the determination to keep fighting afterward. That determination mattered, because the true story of armored warfare was never simply about tanks. It was about the people inside them. The driver who kept moving despite fear. The gunner searching desperately for a hidden target. The loader working under impossible pressure. The commander making life-and-death decisions in seconds. The crew functioning as a single unit when everything around them collapsed. Machines could be replaced. Men could not. As the war moved toward its final months, thousands of Sherman crews continued advancing across Europe. They crossed rivers, entered cities, and fought through some of the toughest battles of the conflict. Many carried memories of vehicles lost and friends left behind. The lessons of those battles stayed with them. Never assume a road is clear. Never underestimate a hidden enemy. Never mistake temporary safety for permanent security. And never forget how quickly circumstances can change in combat. On that cold December day near Krinkelt, a Sherman crew charged forward without hesitation. They believed they were moving toward another mission, another advance, another ordinary day at the front. Instead, they entered the sights of an invisible hunter. Within minutes, routine became chaos, confidence became survival, and disaster became memory. The burning tanks eventually cooled, the smoke eventually disappeared. Snow covered scars left by tracks and explosions. The forests of the Ardennes returned to silence. But for those who were there, the silence never fully erased what happened. Even decades later, they could still picture that frozen road. They could still remember the hidden flash among the trees. They could still feel the impact. And they could still recall the lesson learned on one of the most dangerous battlefields of World War II. In war, the greatest threat is often the one you never see coming.
If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.